They thought I was finished. But my comeback changed everything. The day my perfect life fell apart, the day I lost everything started like any other Tuesday. The alarm rang at 6:30 a.m., and I reached across the bed, expecting to find my wife beside me. Instead, my hand landed on an empty pillow. I smiled to myself. She must already be making coffee, I thought. For 12 years, Emily and I had built what everyone called the perfect life. We owned a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood, drove decent cars, and had enough money to enjoy weekend vacations without worrying about bills. People often said we were the couple everyone admired. I believed them. Looking back now, I realize how dangerous it is to believe appearances. I got dressed, walked downstairs, and noticed the house felt strangely quiet. No coffee, no breakfast, no music playing from the kitchen. Instead, there was a single white envelope sitting on the dining table. My name was written across the front. Daniel. My heartbeat slowed. Something didn't feel right. I opened the envelope. Inside was one sheet of paper. I'm leaving. Don't try to find me. By the time you read this, I'll already be gone. I haven't loved you for a long time. I deserve a better life, and I've found someone who can give it to me. Please don't make this harder than it already is. Emily. I read those words again, then again, and again. They never changed. For a long moment, I simply stood there, unable to breathe. 12 years, reduced to 6 sentences. I pulled out my phone and called her. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again. Blocked. A cold feeling settled deep inside my chest. I rushed upstairs. Her closet was empty. Her favorite jewelry was gone. Even the framed wedding photo from her bedside table had disappeared. She hadn't left in a hurry. She had planned this, every single detail. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty closet. Questions flooded my mind. When did this start? Who was he? How long had she been lying to me? I didn't have answers, but I was about to learn that losing my marriage was only the beginning. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Friends, family, coworkers. Some sounded concerned, others sounded curious. News travels fast when people enjoy the story. I ignored every call. Then my best friend, Ryan, sent a message. We need to talk. I drove to his apartment, hoping he could explain what had happened. Instead, he looked at me with pity. The kind of pity you never want to receive. Daniel! What? He hesitated. You really didn't know? My stomach tightened. Know what? Ryan sighed. Emily has been seeing someone for almost a year. The words hit harder than I expected. A year. He nodded slowly. Most people thought you already knew. My hand started shaking. Who is he? Ryan looked away. I don't think you want to hear it. Tell me. It's your business partner. Everything inside me stopped. No. I'm sorry. No. There are pictures. He handed me his phone. There they were. Emily. Smiling. Laughing. Holding hands with Michael. My business partner. The man I had trusted for 8 years. The man who had stood beside me at my wedding. The man I had called my brother. I couldn't look anymore. I handed the phone back without saying a word. Ryan tried to stop me as I walked toward the door. Daniel, where are you going? I don't know. That was the truth. For the first time in my adult life, I had absolutely no idea where I belonged. When I reached our office the next morning, Michael's desk was empty. His assistant wouldn't meet my eyes. Neither would anyone else. Our accountant asked if we could speak privately. I followed him into the conference room. He closed the door. Daniel, there's something you need to see. He placed several documents on the table. Bank statements, transfer records, contracts. At first, none of it made sense. Then I noticed Michael's signature. Again, and again, and again. Millions of dollars had quietly been moved over the past 11 months. Company money. My company. Our company. Except, it wasn't our company anymore. Without telling me, Michael had manipulated legal documents, shifted ownership, and emptied accounts I thought were secure. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was financial, professional, complete. I felt dizzy. So what happens now? The accountant lowered his head. I'm afraid, unless we can prove fraud, you may lose everything. I stared out the conference room window. Cars moved through the city. People laughed on the sidewalk. Life continued as if nothing had happened. Yet mine had completely fallen apart in less than 24 hours. That evening, I sat alone in my empty house. No wife, no partner, no future, just silence. I looked at our wedding picture, the only copy I still had, saved on my phone. For a brief moment, I wanted to give up, to disappear, to let them win. But then something inside me changed. Not anger, not hatred, something quieter. A promise. I looked into the darkness and whispered 5 words that would change my life forever. They haven't seen my ending yet. They thought I was finished. But my comeback changed everything. They took everything. Or so they thought. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's goodbye letter. Then Michael's smile. Then the bank statements. By sunrise, I realized something that hurt more than the betrayal itself. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. A plan that had taken months to build while I trusted the 2 people closest to me. I drove to the office before anyone else arrived. The building looked exactly the same, but it no longer felt like mine. When I unlocked my office, I noticed something strange. My family photo was gone. The framed award for Entrepreneur of the Year had disappeared. Even my nameplate had been removed from the door. Someone wanted to erase every sign that I had ever belonged there. I walked into the conference room where our attorney was waiting. His expression told me everything before he spoke. Daniel, this is going to be difficult. He spread several legal documents across the table. Michael had convinced investors that I was stepping away from the company because of personal reasons. There were signatures on the paperwork. Signatures that looked exactly like mine. But they weren't. They forged them, I whispered. The attorney nodded slowly. It appears that way. So we call the police. We can. But proving forgery takes time. And during that time, Michael legally controls the company. Every word felt like another brick being placed on my chest. The business I had spent 10 years building was slipping away. That afternoon, I returned home hoping to find at least one place where I still belonged. Instead, I found strangers walking through my living room. A real estate agent. 2 potential buyers. The agent looked surprised to see me. Oh, I thought Mr. Michael had told you. Told me what? She hesitated. The house has been listed for sale. I stared at her. My house. She checked her paperwork. It says both owners agreed. My stomach dropped. Emily's name was also on the property. While I was busy running the business, they had quietly prepared everything. The agent apologized and quickly left with the buyers. I closed the front door and leaned against it. The silence was unbearable. Every room in that house reminded me of a memory that now felt like a lie. The kitchen where we celebrated promotions. The living room where we planned our future. The backyard where Emily once told me she couldn't imagine spending her life with anyone else. Now I wondered if she had meant a single word. A week later, the divorce papers arrived. No apology. No explanation. Just legal documents. Emily wanted everything finalized as quickly as possible. She even requested that all communication go through her lawyer. 12 years together. Reduced to paperwork. I signed the documents without saying a word. Not because I had stopped caring. Because I finally understood something. You can't force someone to value loyalty. The next month was the hardest of my life. Without control of the company, my income disappeared. Bills piled up. Savings vanished into legal fees. Friends who once filled my weekends suddenly became too busy to answer my calls. Some believed Michael's version of the story. Others simply didn't want to get involved. It's amazing how quickly people disappear when your success disappears. Only one person stayed, Ryan. Every Friday evening, he showed up with takeout food and refused to let me sit alone in the dark. You'll get through this, he kept saying. I laughed every time. Get through what? Losing my wife, my company, my home, my reputation. Ryan never argued. He simply replied, "You're still breathing." At the time, those words annoyed me. Months later, they became the foundation of everything. One rainy afternoon, I received a phone call from the bank. The mortgage could no longer be covered. I had 30 days to leave the house. I packed everything I owned into an old pickup truck. Clothes, books, a few family photographs, the coffee mug my father had given me before he passed away. That was all that remained of the life I had spent over a decade building. As I locked the front door for the last time, I didn't cry. There were no tears left. I handed the keys to the bank representative and walked away without looking back. I rented a tiny apartment on the edge of the city. The walls were thin. The furniture was old. The kitchen barely worked. But for the first time in months, no memory lived there. It was empty, just like my future. A few days later, Ryan stopped by carrying a cardboard box. "What's this?" I asked. He smiled. "Your fresh start." Inside was a notebook, a pen, and a simple note. "They took your past. Don't let them take your future." I stared at those words for several minutes. Then I opened the notebook. On the first page, I wrote one sentence. "Everything I lost can be rebuilt. Maybe not the marriage. Maybe not the house. Maybe not the company. But myself. That was still my choice." And for the first time since everything collapsed, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not happiness. Not confidence. Hope. A small spark. But sometimes, one small spark is enough to start a fire. I closed the notebook, looked out the apartment window at the rain, and made another promise to myself. They may have won this chapter, but they will not write the ending. They thought I was finished, but my comeback changed everything. Starting over from nothing. For the first time since I was 23 years old, I was unemployed. No business. No office. No employees calling for advice. No meetings. No schedule. Just silence. People think losing money is the hardest part of failure. It isn't. The hardest part is losing your identity. For over 10 years, I had introduced myself by saying, "I own a business." Now I didn't know who I was anymore. Every morning, I woke up at 6 out of habit, put on a clean shirt, and sat at the tiny kitchen table in my apartment. Then I opened my laptop and searched for jobs. The first week, I applied only for executive positions. No replies. The second week, I lowered my expectations. Still nothing. By the third week, I was applying for almost anything. The savings I had left were disappearing faster than I wanted to admit. One afternoon, my phone rang. It was a warehouse manager named Mr. Collins. "I saw your application," he said. "I'll be honest. You're overqualified. I know. The pay isn't great. I understand. The work is physical. I'll be there tomorrow." He paused. "You really want this job?" "No," I answered honestly, "but I need it." The next morning, I stood in steel-toe boots, loading heavy boxes into delivery trucks. No one there cared that I had once run a successful company. To them, I was simply the new guy. Some of the younger workers whispered when they learned about my past. "Isn't that the businessman who lost everything?" "Yeah, I saw something about him online." I pretended not to hear, because arguing with strangers wouldn't change my reality. Instead, I worked hard. The days were long. The paycheck was small. But every evening, I returned home with something I hadn't felt in months. Self-respect. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. One Friday afternoon, an older employee named Marcus sat beside me during lunch. He had worked in the warehouse for over 30 years. His hands were rough. His back was slightly bent. Yet his smile never disappeared. "You know," he said while opening his lunchbox, "people spend too much time thinking success is about how high you climb." I looked at him. "What do you think it is?" He smiled. "It's about how many times you get back up." Those words stayed with me. That weekend, instead of feeling sorry for myself, I began studying again. Marketing, leadership, artificial intelligence, business trends, anything that could make me better than I had been before. I realized something uncomfortable. Before everything fell apart, I had become comfortable. Too comfortable. I trusted people without asking questions. I stopped learning. I believed success would last forever. Losing everything had forced me to become a student again. And strangely, I was grateful for that. 3 months passed. My body grew stronger from the warehouse work. My mind grew sharper from studying every night. One evening, while leaving work, I noticed a young employee sitting alone outside. His name was Ethan. He looked defeated. "You okay?" I asked. He laughed bitterly. "Not really." "What happened?" "My business failed." I smiled sadly. "I know that feeling." He looked surprised. "You?" I nodded. For the next hour, we talked. Not about failure. About starting again. Before leaving, Ethan asked a question that changed everything. "If you had another chance, What kind of company would you build? I didn't answer immediately, because for the first time, I was actually thinking about it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Ideas filled my notebook. Problems businesses were facing. Services they needed. Mistakes I had made. Mistakes I would never repeat. By sunrise, the notebook contained 12 pages. Not complaints. Plans. Real plans. For the first time in almost a year, my future looked bigger than my past. The following Monday, something unexpected happened. Mr. Collins called me into his office. "I've been watching you," he said. I wondered if I had done something wrong. Instead, he smiled. "You show up early. You never complain. You help everyone." Then he placed an envelope on the desk. Inside was a small bonus. "It isn't much," he said, "but you've earned it." I thanked him and stood to leave. As I reached the door, he said one final sentence. "Daniel, don't stay here forever." I turned around. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "This place helped you survive. It isn't where you're meant to stay." I nodded. Deep inside, I knew he was right. The warehouse wasn't my destination. It was my bridge. That evening, I opened my notebook once again. At the top of a fresh page, I wrote the name of the company I dreamed of building. Then I circled it. Underneath, I wrote just 4 words. No partners this time. I leaned back in my chair and smiled for the first time in over a year. Not because life had become easy, but because I had stopped waiting for my old life to return. I was finally ready to build a better one from the ground up. And somewhere across the city, Michael and Emily were still celebrating what they believed was their greatest victory. They had no idea. Their biggest mistake wasn't taking everything from me. Their biggest mistake was leaving me with nothing left to fear. They thought I was finished, but my comeback changed everything. Building an empire in silence. People often imagine that a comeback begins with one lucky break. It doesn't. It begins with ordinary mornings, with small choices, with showing up when no one is watching. For me, every day followed the same routine. Wake up at 5, work at the warehouse until 4, study until midnight, sleep, repeat. There were no headlines, no applause, no one cheering me on. Just a man trying to rebuild his life, one brick at a time. One evening, Ethan knocked on my apartment door. He carried 2 coffees and a laptop. "I've been thinking about your idea," he said. I smiled. "So have I." We spread papers across my tiny kitchen table. For 6 straight hours, we talked about businesses that struggled with outdated systems, poor customer communication, and inefficient operations. Most companies were spending thousands of dollars solving problems that could be fixed with smarter planning and better technology. "What if," Ethan said, "we build a consulting company that helps small businesses modernize without charging them a fortune?" I leaned back in my chair. It wasn't a flashy idea. It wasn't revolutionary, but it solved a real problem. And real problems create real businesses. For the first time in years, I felt that familiar spark. Not excitement. Purpose. The next morning, before work, I registered the company online. The process took less than 30 minutes. When the confirmation email arrived, I stared at the screen for a long time. The business was real. It had no office, no employees, no clients, no investors, but it existed. I whispered to myself, everyone starts somewhere. Money was still a problem. Every dollar mattered. Instead of renting an office, we worked from my apartment. Instead of buying expensive furniture, we used folding chairs. Instead of hiring staff, Ethan and I did everything ourselves. Sales, marketing, customer support, invoices, even cleaning the apartment before online meetings. Some days we laughed at how ridiculous it looked. Other days we wondered if we were wasting our time. But every morning, we started again. Our first client came from an unexpected place. Mr. Collins, the warehouse manager. He called me one afternoon. "I heard you started a company." I did. "We've got some problems with inventory. I'd be happy to take a look." He smiled. "I trust you." Those 3 words meant more than the contract itself. After everything that had happened, someone still trusted me. We worked for 2 weeks, redesigned their inventory system, and reduced shipping mistakes by almost 40%. Mr. Collins was thrilled. "So," he asked, "can I tell other managers about you?" I grinned. "I was hoping you'd ask." Referrals started coming in. 1 client became 3. 3 became 7. 7 became 15. The money wasn't life-changing. Not yet. But it was enough for me to reduce my hours at the warehouse. For the first time, the business was paying my bills. It felt unreal. One Friday evening, Ethan burst into my apartment with his phone in his hand. "You need to see this." "What happened?" "A business magazine just published an article about fast-growing consulting firms." I raised an eyebrow. "So, we're on the list." I laughed. "There must be a mistake." "There isn't. Our company wasn't famous. We weren't making millions. But people had started noticing us. Not because we spent money on advertising. Because our clients kept recommending us. Trust, the very thing I had once lost, was becoming our biggest strength. Months passed. The apartment became too small. We rented a modest office downtown. Nothing luxurious. Just enough space for 6 desks and a meeting room. As I unlocked the office on the first day, Ethan looked around with a huge smile. "Remember the folding chairs?" I laughed. "I still have them. We should keep one." "Why?" "So we never forget where we started." We placed one old folding chair in the corner of the office. Not because we needed it, because we needed the reminder. Success is dangerous when it makes you forget struggle. Late one evening, after everyone had gone home, I stayed behind to finish paperwork. As I looked out the office window, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered. "Hello." Silence. Then a familiar voice. "Daniel." My heart stopped. Emily. She hadn't spoken to me in almost 2 years. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me," she said quietly. I didn't answer. I just wanted to ask how you've been. I looked around the office. The team. The whiteboard filled with ideas. The company logo on the wall. For the first time since our divorce, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. "I've been busy," I replied calmly. She hesitated. "I heard your new company is doing well." "Yes. I'm happy for you." Her voice didn't sound convincing. It sounded regretful. After a long silence, she finally asked, "Do you ever think about us?" I looked at the folding chair in the corner, then at everything we had built from almost nothing. "I think about the lessons," I said, "but not the life we lost." She didn't speak. Neither did I. A few seconds later, the call ended. I placed the phone on my desk and took a deep breath. The conversation didn't make me feel victorious. It made me feel free. For the first time, the past no longer had power over me. But I had no idea that Emily's phone call wasn't about closure. It was a warning. Because while I had been quietly rebuilding my future, Michael had been quietly destroying his own. And very soon, our paths were about to cross again. They thought I was finished. But my comeback changed everything. The empire begins to crack. Emily's phone call stayed in my mind for days. Not because I missed her. That chapter of my life had already ended. It was the way she sounded. When she left me, her voice had been full of confidence. This time, it carried something else. Fear. I couldn't explain it, but I had a feeling something had changed. I decided not to chase answers. If life had taught me anything, it was this. The truth always finds its way to the surface. A week later, I was sitting in my office reviewing proposals when Ethan rushed in holding his tablet. "Daniel, you need to see this." He placed it on my desk. A business news website had published an article about Michael's company. The headline read, "Major investor withdraws support after financial concerns." I read the article twice, then a third time. Several investors had started asking questions about missing funds and delayed projects. Some contracts had been canceled. Employees were quietly leaving. The company that Michael had stolen from me was beginning to shake. Ethan looked at me and smiled. "Looks like karma finally showed up." I closed the article. "No." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "This isn't karma. It's the result of bad leadership." He had built his success on lies, and lies never make a strong foundation. Over the next month, more stories appeared. Clients complained online. Suppliers demanded payment. Former employees shared anonymous stories about broken promises and poor management. People who had once praised Michael were suddenly distancing themselves from him. The same people who had abandoned me. Success attracts a crowd. Failure reveals who truly belongs. One afternoon, Ryan stopped by the office carrying coffee. He looked around with a proud smile. "I still can't believe this place." I laughed. "Neither can I." He handed me a cup. You know, Michael has been asking about you. I looked up. Asking what? Everything. Your company. Your clients. How fast you're growing. I shrugged. Why? Ryan lowered his voice. Because people are starting to compare the two of you. I smiled politely. I didn't build this company to compete with him. I know. But the world loves comparisons. 2 weeks later, my assistant knocked on my office door. You have a visitor. I'm not expecting anyone. She hesitated. He says his name is Michael. For a moment, the room became completely silent. After nearly 3 years, the man who had taken everything from me was standing in my reception area. I took a deep breath. Send him in. The door opened. Michael walked inside. I almost didn't recognize him. His expensive suits were gone. His confident smile had disappeared. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. He looked exhausted, older, defeated. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. You've done well. Thank you. He looked around the office. It's impressive. I nodded. We've worked hard. He laughed quietly. You always did. Then he looked directly at me. I need your help. Those 4 words surprised me more than anything else he could have said. My help. He nodded. The company's in trouble. I know. I've made mistakes. I remained silent. He took another step closer. If you invest or partner with me, we can fix this. Partner. That word hit me harder than I expected. 3 years earlier, I would have trusted him without hesitation. Now, it sounded like a warning. I slowly stood from my chair. Then I walked to the window. Without turning around, I asked, Do you remember the day I found out about you and Emily? Silence. Do you remember watching me lose my business? More silence. Do you remember saying nothing while my life collapsed? I finally turned to face him. He couldn't look me in the eyes. I'm sorry. The apology came almost as a whisper. I was selfish. I thought success mattered more than loyalty. I was wrong. For a moment, I believed he meant it. Maybe he truly regretted what he had done. But regret doesn't erase consequences. I walked back to my desk and opened the top drawer. Inside was the old notebook Ryan had given me years ago. The first page still read, Everything I lost can be rebuilt. I turned the notebook around so Michael could read it. This, I said quietly, is where my new life began. He stared at the page. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. You shouldn't. I just hoped. He stopped speaking. Hoped for what? That maybe you'd give me the same chance you gave yourself. I closed the notebook. The difference is, I rebuilt my life. I never destroyed yours. Michael lowered his head. For the first time since he'd entered my office, he had no words left. He slowly turned toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped. I really did lose everything. I looked at him calmly. So did I. But only one of us chose honesty when starting over. He nodded without arguing. Then he walked away. I watched through the office window as he disappeared into the crowd below. 3 years ago, I had walked those same streets feeling broken. Now, I understood something I hadn't understood then. The greatest victory isn't watching someone else fall. It's reaching a point where their downfall no longer defines your happiness. But life still had one final surprise waiting for me. Because just 2 days after Michael left my office, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a single flash drive and a handwritten note that read, You deserve to know the whole truth. They thought I was finished, but my comeback changed everything. The truth they could never hide. The package sat on my desk for nearly an hour. A plain brown envelope. No return address. No company logo. Nothing except a small flash drive and a handwritten note. You deserve to know the whole truth. I picked up the flash drive and turned it over in my hand. Part of me wanted to throw it away. I had spent 3 years rebuilding my life. Did I really want to dig through the ashes of my past? But another part of me needed answers. Not for revenge. For closure. I plugged the drive into my computer. A single folder appeared on the screen. Its name was simple. Evidence. My heartbeat quickened. Inside were dozens of files. Emails. Contracts. Bank records. Photos. Voice recordings. Every file was dated from 3 years earlier. The year everything had fallen apart. I opened the first email. It was from Michael to Emily. The date caught my attention. It had been sent almost 18 months before she left me. Don't worry. Daniel still trusts both of us. Everything is going exactly as planned. I froze. As planned, I opened another email. Once the ownership transfer is complete, we'll leave together. Just be patient. Another one. He never checks the financial reports. This is easier than I expected. I leaned back in my chair. Every sentence felt like another punch. It hadn't been a sudden affair. It had been a carefully planned betrayal. For almost 2 years, they had smiled at me, had dinner with me, celebrated birthdays with me, all while secretly planning to take everything I had built. I continued opening file after file. There were scanned documents showing forged signatures, private messages discussing hidden bank accounts, even conversations about how to convince investors that I was becoming unstable. One message made my blood run cold. Emily had written, "Once he's out of the company, he'll never recover." I stared at those words for a long time, not because they made me angry, because they reminded me how wrong they had been. Then I noticed an audio recording. Its file name simply read, "Meeting, private." I pressed play. Michael's voice filled the room. "We'll transfer the remaining money next month." Another man asked, "What if Daniel finds out?" Michael laughed. "He won't. He trusts me like a brother." A few people chuckled. Then came Emily's voice. "Even if he discovers it later, it'll be too late." The recording ended. I closed my eyes. For years I had blamed myself. I thought I had been careless, naive, weak. Now I understood the truth. I hadn't failed because I lacked intelligence. I had failed because I believed loyalty was mutual. Just as I was about to remove the flash drive, I noticed one final folder. Its name surprised me. "Read this last." Inside was a letter, not typed, handwritten. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Emily's. The date was only 3 weeks old. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "Daniel, if you're reading this, it means someone finally sent you the truth. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. When I left you, I convinced myself that I was choosing a better life. Michael promised me everything. Success, luxury, freedom. For a while I believed him. But people who betray others eventually betray each other. The same lies he told you, he later told me. The same secrets we kept together, he began keeping from me. I ignored every warning because admitting I had destroyed my marriage for a lie was too painful. I lost you. Then I lost myself. Now I've lost him too. These files prove everything that happened. I don't want your pity. I only want you to know that you were never the problem. You were the only honest person in our story. I hope one day you find the piece that I threw away. Emily." I placed the letter on my desk. The room was completely silent. 3 years. 3 years of wondering if I could have done something differently. 3 years of replaying every conversation, every decision, every mistake. And now, I finally had my answer. Some betrayals cannot be prevented, because they begin in someone else's heart, not in your actions. That evening, I called Ryan. "I need you to come to the office." An hour later, he arrived. I handed him the flash drive. He spent nearly 40 minutes reading through the files. When he finished, he slowly removed his glasses. "My God! I know. You could destroy Michael with this." I looked out the window. The city lights stretched for miles. 3 years ago, that thought would have excited me. Now, it didn't. Ryan looked confused. "Aren't you going to take this to the authorities?" "I am. But not because I want revenge." He raised an eyebrow. "Then why?" "Because the truth deserves a voice. And because the people he cheated deserve justice." There was a difference. A huge difference. Revenge is about satisfying your anger. Justice is about protecting others. For the first time in years, I finally understood which one mattered more. The next morning, I contacted my attorney. I handed him every file on the flash drive. He looked through the evidence carefully before saying, "Daniel, this changes everything." He explained that the documents could reopen investigations that had been closed years ago. There was enough evidence to expose the forged signatures, the hidden accounts, and every lie that had built Michael's empire. As I left his office, my phone vibrated. A news alert appeared on the screen. Federal investigators announced a new financial fraud inquiry involving a prominent consulting executive. No names had been released, Not yet, but I knew exactly where the investigation was heading. For years, I had wondered if the truth would ever come out. Now it was finally on its way. And this time, no one could hide it. They thought I was finished. But my comeback changed everything. When the truth finally came to light, the news spread faster than anyone expected. At first, it was only a small headline on a local business website. Then another outlet picked it up. By the end of the week, every major financial publication was covering the story. A fraud investigation had officially begun. No one knew every detail yet, but one thing was becoming clear. Michael's empire was falling apart. I sat quietly in my office, watching the headlines appear one after another. 3 years earlier, I had imagined this moment 100 different ways. I thought I would celebrate. I thought I would feel victorious. Instead, I felt strangely calm. Ethan walked into my office carrying his tablet. "You've seen the news?" I nodded. "They're talking about Michael everywhere." I closed my laptop. "I know. You don't seem happy." I smiled. "I already won." He looked confused. "What do you mean?" I looked around the office. Our team was laughing in the conference room. Phones were ringing. New clients were signing contracts. People trusted us. "I stopped competing with Michael a long time ago," I said. "I've been competing with the man I used to be." Meanwhile, Michael's company was falling apart by the hour. Several clients canceled their contracts. Employees resigned. Banks froze company accounts while investigators reviewed financial records. The same investors who once praised him now refused to answer his calls. It reminded me of something Marcus had once said at the warehouse. Success isn't about how high you climb. It's about how many times you get back up. Michael had climbed high, but he had never learned how to stand after falling. A few days later, my attorney called. "Daniel, I need you downtown." When I arrived, he handed me several documents. "The investigation has confirmed multiple forged signatures." I looked through the papers. There was my name. Again and again. Every forged document had finally been identified. The attorney smiled. "You were telling the truth from the very beginning." For a moment, I closed my eyes. Not because I wanted to celebrate, because a weight I had carried for years finally disappeared. People had doubted me. Some had even believed I was responsible for my own downfall. Now, the truth was official. That evening, I received another unexpected visitor. Emily. She stood outside my office building, looking nervous. She wasn't dressed the way I remembered. No expensive clothes. No designer handbag. Just a simple coat and tired eyes. When she saw me, she hesitated. "I won't take much of your time." I nodded toward a nearby bench. We sat down in silence. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. "They've questioned me." "I know." I told them everything. I looked at her. "Why now?" She lowered her head. "Because lying destroyed my life. And I couldn't keep doing it." I believed her. Not because of her words. Because of the way she said them. There was no excuse. No attempt to blame someone else. Only regret. "I don't expect forgiveness," she whispered. "I know. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." The wind carried away her words. For years, I had imagined hearing that apology. I thought it would heal every wound. It didn't. Some scars remain. Not because they still hurt, but because they remind us how much we've survived. I stood up. "I hope you find peace, Emily." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "What about us?" I smiled gently. "There is no us anymore. There are only two people, trying to become better than they once were." She nodded slowly. Then she walked away. This time, neither of us looked back. The following morning, our receptionist rushed into my office. "Daniel, you have another visitor." I smiled. "Who is it this time?" She hesitated. "It's Michael." I took a deep breath. "Send him in." He entered quietly. He looked even worse than before. He had lost weight. His shoulders were slumped. The confidence that once filled every room had completely disappeared. He didn't sit down. He simply stood there. "They've frozen everything," he said. "I know. They're going to charge me." I remained silent. After a long pause, he looked directly at me. "I deserve it." Those words surprised me. He continued. "I spent years blaming everyone else. I blamed pressure. I blamed success. I even blamed you. But the truth is, I made every choice myself." For several seconds, Neither of us spoke. Finally, he asked, "Can you ever forgive me?" I thought carefully before answering. Then I said something I never imagined I would. "I already have." His eyes widened. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. It only frees the person carrying the pain. A tear rolled down his face. He nodded once, quietly turned around, and walked out of my office forever. I never saw him again. As the door closed behind him, I realized something important. The greatest comeback isn't building a bigger company, or earning more money, or proving your enemies wrong. The greatest comeback is becoming someone your past can no longer control. And although the truth had finally come to light, one final chapter still remained. Because life had one last surprise waiting for me. A surprise that would show me what real happiness actually looked like. They thought I was finished, but my comeback changed everything. The comeback that changed everything, final part. People often ask me what happened after the investigation. Did Michael go to prison? Did Emily ever come back? Did I finally get revenge? The truth is, those questions stopped mattering to me a long time ago. Because the greatest chapter of my life began only after I stopped living in the past. Nearly 2 years passed. Our company continued to grow beyond anything Ethan and I had imagined. We moved into a larger headquarters, opened offices in 3 different cities, hired people who had once struggled to find opportunities, just like I had. Whenever we interviewed new employees, I cared less about perfect resumes and more about character. Skills can be taught. Integrity cannot. That became the foundation of our company. Every new employee heard the same words on their first day. We build trust before we build profit. Some thought it was just a slogan. To me, it was a promise. One Saturday morning, Ethan walked into my office carrying an old cardboard box. I found this while cleaning the storage room. I opened it. Inside were the folding chairs from my tiny apartment. The notebook Ryan had given me years ago. The first invoice we had ever sent. Our first business card. And a faded warehouse ID badge with my picture on it. I smiled. "We should keep all of this." Ethan laughed. "You really are sentimental." "No. I just never want to forget where we started. Because success has a strange way of making people rewrite their own history. I never wanted to become one of those people." A month later, I received an invitation to speak at a business leadership conference. Standing backstage, I looked at the audience. Hundreds of entrepreneurs, young professionals, business owners. Many were hoping to discover the secret to success. When my name was announced, I walked onto the stage. The applause was warm. But I remembered another day, years earlier, when I had walked out of my office carrying a cardboard box after losing everything. Life can change faster than anyone expects. I looked across the audience and began. I wasn't invited here because I never failed. I was invited because I learned how to stand back up. The room became completely silent. For the next hour, I didn't talk about profits. I didn't talk about strategy. I talked about trust, about betrayal, about rebuilding when no one believes in you. And I ended with one sentence. Never let someone else's betrayal decide the rest of your life. When I finished, the audience stood and applauded, not for my success, but for my story. That evening, as I left the conference hall, Ryan was waiting outside. He smiled. "You've come a long way." I laughed. "We both have." He handed me something wrapped in brown paper. "Open it." Inside was a brand new leather notebook. On the first page, he had written, "Your next chapter starts today." I looked at him and smiled. "You still believe in notebooks?" "They worked the first time." We both laughed. A few weeks later, I drove past the neighborhood where Emily and I had once lived. The old house looked different. New owners, fresh paint, children playing in the front yard. For a moment, I parked across the street. Not because I missed it, because I wanted to see how far I had come. That house had once represented everything I thought happiness was. Now I understood something different. A house is not a home. Money is not peace. Success is not revenge. Real victory is waking up every morning without bitterness in your heart. I started the engine and drove away. This time, without looking in the rearview mirror. Months later, our company celebrated its 5th anniversary. The office was filled with laughter, music, and familiar faces. Employees shared stories about their journeys. Families toured the building. Children ran through the hallways. Looking around, I realized something. This wasn't just a business anymore. It was a community, a place built on honesty, the very thing that had once been stolen from me. As the celebration came to an end, Ethan walked over and asked, "If you could go back and stop everything that happened, would you?" I thought about Emily, about Michael, about the divorce, the warehouse, the tiny apartment, the lonely nights. Then I smiled. "No." He looked surprised. "Really?" I nodded, because if none of that had happened, I would still be the man who trusted everyone without thinking. I would never have learned resilience. I would never have met the people who helped rebuild my life. And I would never have discovered who I was capable of becoming. Sometimes, the worst day of your life quietly becomes the beginning of your best one. That night, I returned home and placed Ryan's new notebook on my desk beside the old one. One notebook had been filled with pain. The other was still empty. I picked up a pen. On the first page I wrote, Chapter 1, not because my story had ended, because it was finally beginning. As I closed the notebook, I looked out the window at the city lights. Years ago, I had whispered 5 words into the darkness. They haven't seen my ending yet. I was right. They never did, because the greatest comeback wasn't proving them wrong. It was proving to myself that no betrayal is powerful enough to destroy a person who refuses to give up. The end.